Hello and welcome to the Tech Guys AM Court here, the Friday morning edition. We are delighted to have you here for it's going to be maybe an hour, maybe a little bit less of talk, of thought, of speech, of me pontificating and you deciding whether that pontificating is worth your time and money and everything else that comes from doing a live stream podcast. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy. I have Fedora, Doctor Who scarf, and all that stuff will travel. And I am here to talk to you, to share some thoughts with you, etc., etc., etc. So, before we begin, get any deeper, let me remind you that the Tech Guys AM Court is here every Friday at 9:30 is going to be the new starting time, 9:30 every Friday morning. The Tech Guys Sunday court, or I should say Monday AM court, is going to be shifting back to its 12:30 a.m. time, and it'll probably be back in the upstairs because my wife is and I and my son have all finished our quarantine without symptoms. So she'll be back to work. My son will be back to work, and I'll be back to work this week. So I won't be home at midnight. So we'll be back to 12:35, giving me time to drive home and get set. Or I might just drop the Sunday one because people like to sleep. Although I want to like the idea of a 12:35 time so that people on the West Coast can catch it. Reminder, you can find me at DaTechGuyBlog.com, DaTechGuy blog.com, the Tech Guy Blog on Twitter, the Tech Guy Blog channel on YouTube, and there's also my book, Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant and Catholic Prayer. You can find that on Amazon, and you can catch me every Saturday on WQPH 89.3 FM, Shirley Fitchburg. I host the show Your Prayer Intentions under my name, Peter Ingemi, as opposed to the pseudonym, the Tech Guy Blog. As you can see, we don't hide our name here because we're not afraid of our name, like some people on Twitter, etc. So let's get right into today's topics. And topic number one is CNN and the mainstream media ready or not. And by ready, I mean Tara ready or not. Now, when we're talking about Joe Biden as a candidate for president, from our friends, the Democrats, there's already a couple of disadvantages. And Maureen Dowd, a while back, put out a piece on the subject saying that, pointing out that there are reasons why uh, Barack Obama didn't endorse Joe to run in 2016 when he would have been the natural successor to him. Now, I think some of the reasons, frankly, is that he understood that Joe would probably lose bad. And if Joe loses directly after it's one thing about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton may have been Secretary of State during the Obama years, but she wasn't his vice president. So rejecting Clinton is not necessarily rejecting Obama, but rejecting Biden would be. And the last thing that Barack Obama wanted after 8 years in office and after the black vote saved him for a second term. Now, remember, Barack Obama was the only president in history who was reelected with less vote in his second term than in his first. He wasn't reelected because he was popular. He was reelected because, frankly, the black community did not want the first black president to fail at being reelected. They took it. And especially, and at the time, I really listened to black preachers who decided that, given the choice between sticking up for the gospel, because remember, gay marriage was pushed by Biden, and Obama signed on to it, instead of deciding, Christ versus Obama's reelection, got to go with Obama's reelection. And again, that's one of the disadvantages of Protestantism in this sense that you have to make your living from your individual congregations, and a lot of black churches have that structure. But they said, well, we'll go with Biden. We'll go with Hillary instead of Biden in 2016. And again, think about this. Barack Obama, and this is again from Maureen Dowd back a little bit back. This is before Lane with the virus. This. Let me quote from this piece. It was from a February 23rd piece this year, before anyone was talking about the Wuhan virus, except for the president, who had done a few things and was busy being called a racist for them. Biden's appeal for 2020 is that he comes across as a warm, blue collar, touchy feely. I love. We'll emphasize that line. Paternal figure, sometimes talking too much, sometimes saying the wrong thing, like calling parts of Asia the Orient. At 76, he's been through it all and then some. But as he prepares to present himself as a seasoned patriarch who can lead the country in a smooth, classy way, unlike the current occupant of the Oval, he must grapple with the painful reality of life that as head of the family that has messily spilled into the tabloids, a brood that is still brooding and suffering the reverberations of 46-year-old Beau Biden's death from brain cancer in 2015. The last time Biden thought about running, in 2016, he was in a miasma of grief about Beau, his oldest son, the former Delaware Attorney General who Biden fervently hoped might be president someday. Grief aside, Barack Obama and his coterie of top aides did not think the vice president was the right person to extend the Obama legacy. And this is from a piece at Coming DIG News, which leads to the question, what changed Biden to make him the candidate from among a coterie of top Democrat contenders? In 2016, then President Obama and his strategy gurus felt that Biden had, quote, had hit his ceiling, had his day, had too many gaffes. Hillary, Obama thought, was an impressive and loyal cabinet member who was great in meetings. And again, that's from Maureen Dowd. Based on the Biden family scandals, from his siblings to his son Hunter, Ukrainian slush fund, it's hard to envision what changed since 2016 because Biden has not become more articulate. He does not, despite the Botox and what appears to be eye lifts, appear to have the stamina or mental acuity to do a job that no one can describe as easy. Now, again, this is before the big Tara Reade stuff that came up. And of course, there's always the quid pro Joe video, which the media has kept out of under wraps as much as humanly possible. Because God help anybody if they happen to see Joe Biden being Joe Biden. Dangerous thing if Joe Biden is Joe Biden. Dangerous thing if people see it. So, all of that is already in the pot when you're thinking beforehand. And then the Tara Reade accusation comes out. Now, a lot of people on the left are busy saying, oh, you people on the right, you didn't believe Chrissy Blasey Ford, blah, 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 but you're ready to jump on this one. Well, I don't know if Tara Reade is telling the truth. I haven't studied the case. I've read a little bit about the accusation. She may be telling the truth. She may be not. There was one actual argument against her because he's accused of actually penetrating her at one point digitally. And there was a person who worked on Capitol Hill who was in the comments on one of these things saying, all women knew to wear pantyhose there because the guys were very handsy. And Biden does come from an age where handsy was not all that odd. Remember the waitress sandwich with Chris Dodd and Ted Kennedy back in their Senate days. But the point isn't whether or not she's telling the truth at this point. I don't know if she's telling the truth. She might be telling the truth. She might not be. I don't know enough about the case. The point is that it's not being reported on at all. And I want to read you 3 articles concerning this. And I'm going to save the best for last because you always save the best for last. But not when you're leading with the podcast. Okay. This is from the Washington Examiner. And this is from Beckett Adams. What a difference a year makes. Washington Post deputy editorial page Ruth Marcus writes this week that, quote, her gut tells her that Tara Reade's sexual assault allegation against former Vice President Joe Biden is not true. This is quite the take coming from the writer who concluded in her 2019 book that Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh is guilty of a far less credible, uncorroborated allegation of sexual misconduct dating back to his high school days, which was brought against him by Chrissy Blasey Ford during his Senate confirmation. Reade claimed she was sexually assaulted by Biden when she worked for him as a Senate aide in the early 1990s. Marcus tries to distinguish Ford from Reddy by asserting there is no evidence that Biden would behave such a way with a woman, whereas the Kavanaugh chapter produced evidence, albeit inconclusive, of other incidents when he was young and problematic behavior towards women. Wait. What other, quote, incidents involving Kavanaugh serve as, quote, evidence of his inappropriate behavior towards women? Is Marcus talking about Julie Swetnick, whose laughable claim that she witnessed Kavanaugh participating in gang rapes when he was 15 years old fell apart almost instantly under scrutiny? Is Marcus talking about Deborah Ramirez, whose story alleging Kavanaugh exposed himself as college was denied by everyone supposedly present when it happened? Or perhaps Marcus is referring to that anonymous letter claim supposedly made by anonymous third parties that Kavanaugh had once, quote, aggressively and sexually pushed a woman up against the wall. Is this the so-called evidence Marcus cites? Biden is notorious for pawing women up and down, making them feel very uncomfortable. Even Marcus admits that. That does not make Biden guilty, nor does it make his allegation credible. But Reddy has so far offered more evidence against Biden than anyone ever offered against Kavanaugh. Remember, news outlets went to great lengths in 2018 to establish a pattern of wild, unruly behavior by Kavanaugh. The best they could find was a story alleging that he had thrown some ice at someone in a bar in 1985. Quote, the likelihood of definite proof one way or the other seems frustratingly low. My gut says that what Reddy alleges did not happen. My head instructs me that it's within the realm of possibility, and fairness requires acknowledging that. And there is another point to bear in mind. Double standards work in both directions. Those who disbelieved and diminished Chrissy Blasey Ford face the challenge of explaining why they seem to be so much more eager to credit Tara Reade's account. Now, that argument would have a lot more weight if they didn't wait 45 days or so to cover the story. But now back to the piece. But this is also disingenuous, for the double standard points in only one direction. Most of those who have highlighted Reddy's allegation have never claimed that Biden is a rapist. Indeed, nearly all of them have been careful to note Reddy's inconsistencies and express appropriate skepticism in regards to her story. But they have highlighted a double standard to which Kavanaugh was quite clearly subjected to. He should have been given the treatment that Marcus, with apparently zero self-awareness, now gives Biden. Ford either forgot or gave inconsistent answers about basic details of her alleged assault, such as its date, even its year, and its location. No one, not even her high school friends supposedly present when it happened, could corroborate what Ford and Kavanaugh had ever met or been in the same room together. Reddy or Reade, I don't know how it's pronounced actually. In contrast, if the media on TV had covered this, I'd know how to pronounce this. In contrast, actually worked in Biden's office. That is a matter of record. So even if her story is not credible, it's already more credible than the one that forwards for that reason above. Even Marcus is forced to concede that Reddy, who supported Senator Bernie Sanders and might have ulterior motives for coming forward in an election year, has nonetheless provided some contemporaneous corroboration of the claim. Again, this cannot be said of Ford. Finally, I am puzzled by Marcus' contention that Reddy's case seems politically motivated, whereas Ford's does not. What does she think Kavanaugh hearings were about? In Marcus's 2019 book, Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh, and the Conservative Takeover, she concludes that the Senate's supposedly rushed investigation of allegations against Kavanaugh ensures that his tenure in the Supreme Court will forever have an asterisk attached. Fast forward to 2020, and Marcus is hesitant to make such a simplistic, if implicit, judgments of guilt without evidence. Now she writes, I don't think what Reade claimed happened, yet the evidence is murky. That might be code for Joe Biden is a Democrat. And remember DaTechGuy's laws of media outrage. If you go to my site, do a search for DaTechGuy's law of media outrage. And there are several laws, and maybe at the next podcast I'll go through them because it would take too much time here, that definitely state how the media will react in any situation. And this is a textbook case of it. There's another piece here I'm having fun with, and that is by Brad Palumbo, also at the Washington Examiner. And this is titled, Glaring Me Too Hypocrisy Haunts Warren Endorsement of Biden. Senator Elizabeth Warren is a hypocrite. This isn't news. Frankly, we've known this for quite some time now. Whether it's attacking 2020 competitor Pete Buttigieg for the same kind of fundraising for millionaires that she herself had just recently engaged in, or lying to smear rival Bernie Sanders as sexist, Warren has a long history of insincerity. But even with all this in mind, the glaring hypocrisy posed by the senators late in the game endorsement of the presumptive nominee Joe Biden is a doozy. In a compelling video released Wednesday, Warren endorsed Biden and backed his 2020 campaign. She also said Wednesday evening that she would agree to be his running mate if asked. Warren's endorsement focused on Biden's character, highlighting what she sees as his compassion, fundamental decency, and competence. It was honestly a well done and moving endorsement. And her tweet on with the endorsement is listed in the piece, saying, "This is Elizabeth Warren, quote, in this moment of crisis, it's more important than ever that the next president restores Americans' faith in good, effective government. I've seen Joe Biden help our nation rebuild. Today, I'm proud to endorse him as president of the United States. There's just one glaring problem." Back to the piece. Biden now faces an accusation of sexual assault. It isn't necessarily true, but Warren has established herself as one of the nation's most prominent Me Too advocates, demanding in the past that we believe all women and rallying against Republicans who face similar or even more unfounded accusations, such as Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now, we're going to skip ahead because this is very, very long. Now that Biden faces an accusation, boy, has Warren's tune changed. Suddenly, she herself is the one willing to step on the alleged victim of a vicious sexual assault, unquote, to advocate her party's agenda. Former Senate staffer Tara Reade has accused her former boss of sexually assaulting her in 1993. In this case, unlike that of Blasey Ford, we can actually place Reddy in the same room as Biden, since she did indeed work for in the Senate office, and under her story has inconsistencies. It also has more contemporaneous cooperation than Ford's ever did. Warren doesn't care because Biden is a Democrat. The senator released her Biden endorsement just days after the New York Times published an explosive story on Reade's allegations. It didn't make her rethink anything. Far from hearing out a courageous survivor and treating her with respect, Warren has given Reddy the cold shoulder and disregarded a more credible accusation than one that she believed disqualified Kavanaugh from public life. To quote the senator herself, our country deserves better. Now, I want to point out something here that is very, very, just very funny. The explosive story at the New York Times was all about, why it's not such a big deal. And let's want to point out one other thing about the Reddy accusation. She's filed a police report, which means that she's liable. If she could be sued for a false statement or even arrested for making a false statement. We don't have that with Chrissy Blasey Ford. We don't. We never did. And I think it's hilarious that we're seeing that. But now those were the warm-ups. The best piece is from Molly Hemingway, which is not a surprise because Molly Hemingway is awesome. This is Molly Hemingway's piece. CNN's flooded zone with Kavanaugh coverage hasn't mentioned Biden's accuser once. Now, I should point out this piece is from April 16th, and today is April 17th. It's 9:45 a.m., and I do not know if CNN has mentioned the accuser since then, since I read this piece. I have not turned on the TV. I don't turn on CNN, so I do not know, and I have not done the search. So that is a failing on my part. But it's been 24 hours since this piece, and it is possible, just slightly possible, that CNN has mentioned her since then. But it is also very possible that they have not. But regardless of whether it's possible or not, we're going to read the piece as soon as I retweet the podcast link. So I'm going to put down the mic for a second. And we're going to go in here, and I'm going to speak a little loud so the mic can pick me up. Over podcast. He's on. Tara Reade blackout. Watch love. Let's see. So we're going to tweet that out. I got to send the link too, because if people don't see the link, they're unlikely to click on it and come to the podcast. And this podcast, just a reminder, is an exercise in capitalism. So we're going to try and exercise that capitalism and send that out. See if people will pick up that podcast. So, where were we? All right. The Molly Hemingway piece. And then I've got a piece from Stacey McCain and one of my own that we're going to be reading. Okay, where was that link? Here we are. Molly Hemingway, CNN flooded zone with Kavanaugh coverage, hasn't mentioned Biden's accuser once. CNN published more than 700 articles on Christy Blasey Ford, who, without evidence, accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault. When Christine Blasey Ford accused federal judge Brett Kavanaugh of nearly killing her and trying to rape her when he was in high school, she was unable to provide any evidence that the two had even met. That didn't stop the media outlets from doing everything they could to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's life and keep him from becoming a Supreme Court justice. When Tara Reade accused her former employee, Joe Biden, of sexually assaulting her when he was a United States senator, media outlets buried the news. The Washington Post, the New York Times were finally forced to mention it on Easter Sunday. And notice that they mentioned it on Easter Sunday. Talk about it, not just a Sunday news dump, but an Easter Sunday news dump. But CNN has enforced a strict block on even mentioning the allegation, much like giving it the kind of coverage Blasey Ford received from her claim. Even for a generally corrupt media that is engaged in disinformation campaigns on a routine basis, the disparity in how CNN gave wall-to-wall coverage of Blasey Ford and has forbidden any coverage of Reade or Reade, depending on how you pronounce it, is shocking. CNN took part in the media's shared political effort against Kavanaugh by turning its cable news coverage into nonstop attention on the allegation. Online, that meant more than 700 articles, including at least 7 on the Sunday that the allegation was made public, in a sympathetic telling to the Washington Post. Here, quote, "Read the letter Christy Blasey Ford sent accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct. Post reporter says Kavanaugh's accuser was, quote, terrified about going public, unquote. Republican senators weigh in on delaying Kavanaugh vote. Echoes of Anita Hill and allegations against Kavanaugh. Dems call for delay of Kavanaugh vote after accuser comes forward. Listen to the letter from Kavanaugh's accuser and Washington Post. Kavanaugh accuser comes forward." By September 17th, the operation really got rolling with sympathetic coverage around the clock and articles and headlines, with headlines such as the following. "These senators could make or break Kavanaugh's nomination. The Kavanaugh controversy is a watershed moment for the GOP. Trump stands by Kavanaugh, supports a full process. Why the Kavanaugh allegations come at the worst possible time for Republicans. An interview with the reporter who broke the Post story. Kellyanne Conway says Kavanaugh's accuser should not be ignored or insulted. A page devoted to video on Kellyanne Conway's statement. Kavanaugh allegations lead to White House scramble. Lawyer, Kavanaugh accuser willing to testify publicly. State of play of the Kavanaugh nomination on Capitol Hill. Joe Biden reacts to the Kavanaugh allegation, reviving memories of the Anita Hill hearing. Why sexual assault survivors often don't come forward. Why Dianne Feinstein waited to take the Brett Kavanaugh allegations to the FBI. White House plan to defend Kavanaugh relies heavily on women. Brett Kavanaugh, Christy Blasey Ford to testify on assault allegations in public Monday. Indeed, his accusations did not hurt public support for Clarence Thomas in 91. Republicans and Democrats grapple with Kavanaugh political fallout 7 weeks from midterms. The power of a named accuser. Kavanaugh's future now hangs in the balance. Mark Judge, Kavanaugh's high school classmate, details high school parties and past writings, and many others. By September 18th, CNN's participation in the anti-Kavanaugh campaign was even more intense. And again, these are articles on their site. Why Kavanaugh should make men question empathy. Dianne Feinstein, elected in the Year of the Woman, navigates politics of Me Too. Julia Louis-Dreyfus lends support to Brett Kavanaugh accuser. Anita Hill, Senate should do better than it did in 91. Doug Jones, Senate should compel Kavanaugh friend to testify. Kavanaugh nomination descends into chaos. What if Christy Blasey Ford doesn't testify? With Kavanaugh, McConnell's throne is on the line. Christy Blasey Ford is risking it all to speak out. Kavanaugh decision moment, a horrendous act or monstrous lie. Emmy attendee shows up with "Stop Kavanaugh" written on her arm. What the Wall Street Journal gets dead wrong about Christy Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh. Women hold the key to Kavanaugh and maybe the control of Congress. Trump on Kavanaugh. This is not a man who deserves this. Former classmate of Kavanaugh denies being a party in sexual assault allegation. Kavanaugh accuser wants FBI investigation before testifying. Senator Herrero's mission to men: just shut up and step up. Do the right thing. 5 big questions about the Kavanaugh hearing. Kavanaugh uncertain for Monday. Accuser wants FBI to investigate before hearing. George W. Bush defends Kavanaugh. A fine husband and father and friend. Accuser's friend. She is nothing but honest. Reliable sources. Kavanaugh questions left, right, and reactions. Mark Judge said it. He has no memory of alleged incident with Kavanaugh. Read Christy Blasey Ford's attorney's letter requesting FBI investigation and many more. We'll throw in some of the September 19th headlines for good measure. Trump calls Kavanaugh an extraordinary man. Kavanaugh accuser made her move. Now Republicans have to choose. Marisi Horo. Kavanaugh accuser is hesitating to testify because she's afraid of GOP railroad job. Trump says she wants to see Kavanaugh accused to testify. 6 possible Kavanaugh scenarios, including a Supreme Court vacancy, is still 2021. Need to Hill. FBI should investigate Ford's claim. Kavanaugh accuser says he was drunk at the time. What did he say about alcohol and memory loss? Kavanaugh accuser lawyer. Rush to a hearing is unnecessary. Friend of Kavanaugh accuser speaks out. Tubin, if she won't testify, he gets confirmed. Reliable sources. The Supreme Court clock is ticking. Republicans just made a giant gamble on Brett Kavanaugh. Collins says it's not fair for Kavanaugh accuser not to testify. Did Donald Trump just hedge on Brett Kavanaugh's future? McCaskill voting against Kavanaugh has nothing to do with accusations. Grassley sets Friday deadline to hear back from Kavanaugh accuser. Garmandi, this is a defining Me Too moment. Accuser's lawyer. Rush to hearing unnecessary. Gillibrand, GOP approach upouts to sham hearing on Kavanaugh accusations. Begala, hypocrisy. Thy name is GOP. GoFundMe raises more than $100,000 to help Kavanaugh accuser with security expenses. Graham wants Kavanaugh vote before midterms. Senator John Kennedy says Kavanaugh is resolute, determined, and unequivocal, and many more. The deluge went on and on and on, culminating in more than 700 articles, not to count the hundreds of hours of televised discussions. CNN's political campaign against Kavanaugh included sympathetic articles towards Blasey Ford, hostile articles about Kavanaugh, supportive pieces about the importance of believing all women, even when they provide no evidence, hostile pieces about the danger of due process and empathy for men, and targeting of key Republican senators. CNN's work culminated with their award-winning efforts to sway Arizona's Senator Jeff Flake, broadcasting a confrontation between a professional activist and the wavering senator. It's a low bar, but Tara Reade's accusation is undoubtedly stronger than the one made against Kavanaugh. Unlike Blasey Ford, she told multiple people about the allegation incident at the time it happened, not 3 decades later. And unlike Blasey Ford, she has evidence that she met the accused, and in her case, when she worked for him in the U.S. Senate. Here's what CNN has done with the allegation against Joe Biden by Tara Reade. And you have a page of a search function on CNN saying Tara Reade. Your search for Tara Reade did not match any documents. Now, I think that's rather devastating. But the most fun part about this, those pieces of fun. But even more fun is this piece by Robert Stacey McCain. And this piece by Robert Stacey McCain is titled, Feminist Jessica Valenti, vote for Biden because Orange Man bad. Jessica Valenti, I'll do what's right, but I'm furious. I can't believe I have to vote for Joe Biden. Democrat women are once again being helped to save the country by voting for a deeply problematic man. That's her tweet from April 14th. Here's Stacey's piece. When last we took notice of, quote, feminist Jessica Valenti, she was, quote, despairing about the failure of Elizabeth Warren's campaign. Quote, I knew going into Super Tuesday that Elizabeth Warren was unlikely to win big. I had prepared myself for that. What did take me by surprise, though, was just how poorly she fared. Even in her home state of Massachusetts, she finished 3rd. It's enough to make me feel, well, despairing that we had a candidate of a lifetime, someone with energy, vision, and follow-through to lead the country out of our nightmarish era, and that the media and voters basically outright erased and ignored her. Damn, and remember, these are all Democrat voters, just to remind everybody. This was a Democrat primary. So all the people she's disappointed in are Democrats. Whoever the nominee is, and at this point that just was written, that it wasn't settled yet, their campaign is going to have to come to terms with intense misogyny so many female voters have dealt with, and understand that this is an issue we deeply care about, and the supporters are going to have to let us be sad, depressed even, that once again we're going to watch a race with leadership between old white men. Stacey McCain, cry more, bitch, assuming that anything that makes you unhappy is objectively good. By the way, what's the COVID-19 rate in your posh Brooklyn neighborhood? But never mind that. There's your latest personal disaster. Again, quoting Valenti's latest piece. On election night 2016, my 6-year-old daughter and I wore matching feminist T-shirts, ordered a pizza, and sat glued in front of the television with my mother. Assuming 3 generations of women were about to watch the first female president be elected, I bought a bottle of champagne. It's still sitting in a dusty corner of my bar. This November, there won't be any buzzy excitement or matching T-shirts with my daughter. On election day, my choice will be between Donald Trump, a dangerous bigot who has been credibly accused of rape and sexual assault and harassment by more than 2 dozen women over a 4-decade period, and Joe Biden, a man recently accused of sexually assaulting a Senate aide in the 1990s, who has made fun of the women who complained about his precedent for unwanted shoulder rubs. Biden is the better choice by a mile, and I'll do what's right for the country and vote for him. But I'm still furious. I can't believe when faced with the most dangerous president of our lifetime, Democrats are moving ahead with a nearly 80-year-old moderate who's shown time and time again not up for the fight. I am livid that Democrat women will be called on once again to cast our vote in the name of reducing harm to a country rather than moving it forward. Most of all, I'm angry that people who want Trump out are expected to just vote without airing our concerns about the man who stands between us and him in another 4 years. Stacey McCain. Joe Biden is the Democrat you deserve, Jessica. Your particular hustle, 2 decades of promoting a brand of, quote, feminism, that is, in fact, nothing but partisanship aimed towards mobilizing women to vote Democrat, has finally been exposed as the shabby grift it always was. You have about as much credibility as Bill Kristol, Rick Wilson, and the rest of the Never Trump crew, which is to say, no credibility at all. Amazing what Trump derangement syndrome does to people. Now, to those pieces, I want to add one more. And I want that piece to be my own. And one of the things I wrote about concerning this was the fact that Andrea Ocasio-Cortez was asked about this. Now, normally when Cortez speaks, it gets covered by CNN. This time it didn't. And my piece is titled AOC Biden Reade, the right thing and the smart thing. Quote, as a general rule, the right thing is the smart thing. Peter, Michael, Dominic, and Jeremy. That's one of my quotes. I've been saying that for decades. The right thing, as a general rule, the right thing is the smart thing. And I'm not just talking about for your soul. There aren't a lot of things I like about AOC. I respect her campaign that took advantage of an incumbent who paid little or no attention to his district, which is a proper argument. And while she is generally wrong, in fact, amazingly wrong about many things, but she's dead right about confronting Joe Biden's situation vis-a-vis Tara Reade. Quote, the congressman didn't miss a beat before responding, siding with the questioner entirely. She said that the issue is totally legitimate and needs to be confronted rather than just silencing anyone who tries to bring it up, CBS News. And there's real irony in AOC speaking out. This is Tara Reade's tweet. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is literally the first member of Congress to address publicly what happened to me when I worked for Joe Biden. Thank you, AOC. And that tweet's from April 14th. Not only is this the right and consistent thing as opposed to the silence of CNN and the spin of the New York Times, but how many Me Too people follow Rose McGowan who have heard of this? How many leftists read the Amazing Times interview about their coverage? And do Democrats really think Donald Trump is going to remain silent about this during the debates? He'll not only destroy Biden with it, but he'll destroy the media for ignoring it, and he will definitely bring up the Kavanaugh double standard. Much smarter to get this resolved before the convention fight that is going to take place, or the debate debacle that will come after it when Biden's female VP is asked about it by Mike Pence. Or did nobody think of that? Apparently, AOC did, and the fact that she's apparently smarter than the entire Democratic establishment says something about them, and nothing nice either. And this is what I can't understand about this that's being done. Do these people actually believe that in a debate with Joe Biden, Donald Trump isn't going to bring this up? Do they actually think about this. Do they my first thought when this came out, and the thought is still kind of in the back of my head, is that the Democrats need an excuse to hang their hat on to get rid of Joe Biden. They really, really needed to get rid of Joe Biden. They understand that Biden isn't a winner. And this is a reason for taking him off the ballot, because they waited until, you wait until Bernie Sanders drops out. Now, this is why I was surprised that Sanders dropped out, because I thought if the Reade accusation comes through, then Biden, and they drop Biden, Sanders has the most delegates, he's kind of walks into it, or at least has a lot of pressure to walk into it. But I'm becoming more and more of the opinion that Bernie Sanders is kind of more about the grift, more about getting a lot of small donors to give him money and then paying himself and his family out of his campaign funds for working on his campaign and getting rich off of it. And if he actually runs for president and loses, then the grift doesn't work anymore. So maybe that's why Sanders pulled out. But my thought was, this is the excuse that the Democrats need to pull Biden from the ballot. But apparently, this is not the case. They are all protecting him, but they can't protect him forever. And this is a Facebook age. Sooner or later, it wouldn't surprise me if it was during a coronavirus briefing. And if he does, he'll be criticized for it. But it doesn't matter what Trump does because he's always criticized for it. Sooner or later, he's going to drop the name Tara Reade or Tara Reade, however her name is pronounced. And the networks will not be able to cut away fast enough. And they're going to have to ask who that is. And it's sort of like, it's the same dynamic during the 2016 campaign when on MSNBC, on the Morning Joe show, one of their guys brought up the fact that, sooner or later, someone's going to say Jeffrey Epstein and talk about Bill Clinton's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and game over. And everybody at that, I love that thing. That was Donnie Deutsch who said that. And I love that moment because everyone at the table knew what they were talking about, but nobody wanted to speak about it. And then MSNBC hid that video. You couldn't find the video of him saying that. You had to jump through Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy level, beware of the tiger signs, to find that video. I wrote about that extensively. You're going to do a search for Donnie Deutsch on my site, and you'll see that. It's really, really funny. But this is coming, and they can't hide it. And the fact that they're doing what they're doing now is amazing to me. It's astounding to me that they can't see. I mean, I can see this. I can see what problems this is going to be. Now, it could also be the other thing I was thinking of, that the Democrats have decided they have no chance in this election, and if they're going to lose big, they want to have someone who it doesn't hurt them to get beaten. And Joe Biden, his career is pretty much over. They'd rather have a Biden beaten than any of the other people out there. That's possible too. Or it could just be that they think that they're smart enough to be able to get around this. I don't see that happening, but they see this happening. So I can't understand it. I can't understand it. And the clincher is the Trump War Room sending out a tweet of Biden's appearance on CNN talking about his plan to reopen the government. Quote, Biden, there's during World War II, when Roosevelt came up, a thing, that was totally different than he called it the World War II. He had the World War II War Production Board. And that's from the Don Schuber site. That's from the Trump War Room. Don Schuber labels it Democrat elder abuse continues. And my wife has just said that that's elder abuse. And she says thinks it's terrible what they're doing to him. But she doesn't like him, but he's being treated. He's a sacrificial lamb. My wife works in a nursing home, so she deals with people who are old and have some issues. And she doesn't like older people being treated poorly, and that's basically what's going on with Joe Biden. But the Democrats have decided this is what they're going to do, and this is how they're going to deal with it. So, if you can't figure out now maybe they figure short-term cost versus long-term cost. So we're going to let that go. But speaking of reopening the country, we go to topic number 2. The Trump administration now has put out its phased plan for reopening the country. We're going to read you from the Boston Herald piece here. Trump gives governors 3-phase plans to open economy. This is from the AP by Zeke Millen, Alan Sunderman, and Kevin Freaking. Freaking? Freking. Yeah, Freaking. Or maybe it's pronounced differently. What a freaking name. President Trump gave governors a roadmap Thursday for recovering from the economic pain of coronavirus pandemic, laying out a phased and deliberate approach, unquote, to restoring normal activity in places that have stopped testing and are seeing a decrease in COVID-19 cases. Quote, we're starting our life again, unquote, Trump said during his daily press briefing. Quote, we're starting rejuvenation of our economy again, unquote. He added, quote, this is a gradual process. The new guidelines are aimed at easing restrictions in areas with low transmission of the coronavirus while holding the line in harder hit locations, make it clear that the return to normalcy will be a far longer process than Trump initially envisioned, with federal officers warning that some social distancing measures may need to remain in place through the end of the year to prevent a new outbreak. And they largely reinforce plans already in the works by governors who have a primary responsibility to public health in their states. Quote, you're going to call your own shots, Trump told the governors Thursday afternoon in a conference call, according to an audio recording obtained by the AP. We're going to be standing alongside you. Places with declining infections and strong testing would begin a three-phase gradual reopening of business and schools. In phase one for existence, the plan recommends strict social distancing for all people in public. Gatherings larger than 10 people are to be avoided, and non-essential travel is discouraged. In phase two, people are encouraged to maximize social distancing and limit gatherings to more than 50 people unless precautionary measures are taken. Travel could resume. Phase 3 envisions a return to normalcy for most Americans with a focus on identification and isolation of any new infections. Trump said the recent trends in some states were so positive they could almost begin in taking the steps laid out in phase 1 now. They will be able to literally go tomorrow. Trump said, unquote. The guidelines recommend that the states pass checkpoints that look at new cases, testing, and surveillance data over the prior 14 days before advancing from one phase to another. Governors of both parties made it clear that they will move at their pace. Delaware John Carney, a Democrat, said the guidelines, quote, seem to make sense. Quote, we're days, maybe weeks away from the starting line, and then you have 14 days of declining cases or declining symptoms and hospital capacity that exists in case you have a rebound, he said. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, a Trump ally, cautiously floated the idea of reopening parts of the state, but said testing capacity and contact training would need to be considerably ramped up before restrictions could be safely limited. Quote, all would be forgotten very quickly if we moved into a stage quicker than we should and then got into a situation where we had people dying like flies, Justice told reporters. At the earliest, the guidelines suggested some parts of the country could see a resumption in normal commerce and social gatherings after a month of evaluating whether or not easing up restrictions has led to a resurgence of virus cases. In other parts of the country, if virus cases pick up, it could be substantially longer. In briefing governors on the plan, Trump said they were going to be responsible for deciding when it's safe to lift restrictions in their states. Just days before, he had drawn swift pushback for claiming he had absolute authority to determine how and when states reopen. Quote, we have a very large number of states that want to get going and they're in good shape, unquote, Trump said. That's good with us, frankly. The guidelines also include several recommendations to businesses as they plan for their potential reopenings, suggesting temperature taping, rapid COVID-19 testing, and widespread disinfection efforts in workplaces. Those most susceptible to the respiratory disease are advised to remain sheltered in place until their areas enter the final phase, and even then are encouraged to take precautions to avoid close contact with other people. Governors, for their part, have been moving ahead with their own plans for how to safely revive normal activity. 7 Midwestern governors announced Thursday that they will coordinate on reopening their economies. Similar pacts were announced earlier this week in the West and Northeast. 2 in 3 Americans expressed concerns that restrictions meant to slow the spread of the virus would be eased too quickly, according to a Pew Research Center survey released Thursday. More than 30,000 people in the U.S. have died from the virus. Trump has also held conference call Thursdays with lawmakers he named to the new Congressional Advisory Task Force on reviving the economy. The economic costs were clear in the new federal data, showing at least 22 million Americans have been thrown out of work the last month. But the legislators repeatedly urged the president not to sacrifice public health by moving too quickly. Quote, my highest priority on this task force will be to ensure that the federal government efforts to reopen our economy are bipartisan, data-driven, and based on the expertise of public health professionals, quote, unquote, said Democrat Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. The federal government envisions a gradual recovery from the virus, which in disruptive mitigation measures may be needed in some places, at least until a vaccine is available, a milestone unlikely to be reached until sometime next year. Quote, it's not going to be immediately a situation where we have stadiums full of people, said Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson on Thursday. We're Americans. We will adapt, he added. Trump on Thursday claimed the U.S. had, quote, built the most advanced and robust testing anywhere in the world, unquote. But even people close to him warned that more would be necessary. We are struggling with testing on a large scale, South Carolina Lindsey Graham told ABC News' The View. We really can't go back to work until we have more tests. Former Vice President Joe Biden, Trump's likely opponent in the November presidential election, said Thursday evening that Trump, quote, kind of punted. Quote, we're not going to be able to really make significant changes in the 3 phases the president's talking about until we're able to test much more broadly, Biden said on CNN. There was also concern that the White House was taking too rosy a view on the trends in the U.S. Quote, I would not declare a peak almost anywhere in the U.S. yet, said Mark Lipsitch, a Harvard epidemiology professor and who is director of the University Center for Communicable Disease Dynamics. He recommended, quote, working to enhance surveillance and testing so if we do hit a peak, it will be possible to identify it with greater certainty. But some of Trump's conservative allies, like economist Stephen Moore, have encouraged him to act swiftly, warning of a mini depression if we keep the economy shut down. This is a catastrophic outcome from our country, period, Moore said. He advised the president. A big testing ground for Trump's roadmap could be Texas, where Republican Governor Greg Abbott, by the way, who has gotten no credit for the job he's done because he's a Republican and plus he's a Republican in a wheelchair. So the media is not going to push him forward at all. We're stuck close to federal guidelines throughout the crisis. Will lay out his reopening plan Friday. Abbott said the progress will be gradual, but he's facing pressure from conservative members to get Texas back to work. The White House proposal presented Thursday is different from what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended last week, according to a draft of the recommendations obtained by the Associated Press. The CDC talked about using more specific criteria and in many cases looking for improvement over longer periods of time before easing restrictions on high transmission areas. Now, that doesn't seem like all that different. Examples include wanting to see substantial reductions over the next 30 days in positive tests for coronavirus and sustained reductions over 15 days in the numbers of coronavirus deaths. And that's an AP story that was picked up by the Boston Herald. Now, one fun thing about these various task forces is a piece at dbdailyupdate.com. Mitt Romney wanted to stand out among his peers and Trump accommodates him. As President Trump rolls out his administration guidelines for opening America, only one Republican U.S. senator will not be asked to provide input on the process. Early Thursday afternoon, the president listed the names of the Republican and Democrat members of Congress who would be part of his coronavirus congressional advisory group. The list includes over 24 senators and House Democrats, 21 House Republicans, and 52 of the 53 Republican Senate members. The only GOP senator left off the list? Mitt Romney, who not coincidentally was the only GOP senator who made the despicable decision to vote to convict President Trump on one of the 2 hoax articles of impeachment that the Democrats concocted last fall. Cool. Also conspicuously absent from the advisory group roster are the names of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the Democrat leaders in the House and Senate, respectively. Here are some other notable names you will not find on this roster. Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, Steny Hoyer, James Kleinborg, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Radisha Tlaib, and Anaya Presley. Indeed, not a single member of the Democrats' party's House or Senate leadership teams or any of the 4 nitwits who made up the infamous squad in the House appear on the advisory group. Apparently, the president is more interested in getting things done than in a partisan hyper circus. And that's really what the bottom line here is. It's to the Democrats have been looking for a way to stop the Trump economy. And this virus was a godsend to them. And because it was a godsend to them, they want, the longer the economy is shut down, the better the chances for Joe Biden. Not that the chances for Joe Biden are all that great, but the better the chances there are for him. So they want to delay the reopening as long as they can, because the longer the reopening is delayed, the longer the economy takes to come back, and the longer the economy takes back, the longer the better the odds against Donald Trump, which is what this is all about. And let's not pretend that it's about anything else, because it's not about anything else to the left. It never is. All of this is a means to the end. And because it's a means to the end, that's what people are looking at. That's what people are going for. So the president actually everyone's talking about, the president backed away from what he said about power. Actually, he didn't. He said very clearly in his speech, don't want to use this power, but I've got this power. And under the precedents from Abraham Lincoln's Civil War time, he does have this power. But now he's deferred to the states and he's laid out an outline. And now it becomes on the states. The states can choose to open, the states can choose not to open. The real question is going to be, and this is the problem, and there's a constitutional question here. Let's say that Ohio opens before New York, and it will. Let's say that Texas opens before New York, and it will. Let's say that Tennessee opens before New York, and it will. Let's say that Maine opens before New York, and it will. What do you do about New Yorkers who don't want to stay quarantined who head for the state? That's the real problem. The danger of the reinfection isn't so much will a state open early. It's will places where the virus is a problem, where the people there attempt to go out when they shouldn't. Now, the American people have a lot of common sense, but there's 330 million Americans. And under my crazy uncle theory, and my thought was that there's always, and my crazy uncle theory is one of the first things I ever wrote. And it's saying that, there's always, if you have a family get together, there's always one crazy uncle. And any of you who have relatives know this. And the crazy uncle, there's crazy uncles everywhere. What the internet did is allowed crazy uncles to band together, which is where you get Twitter from and some of the weird stuff you get from Twitter. But if even 1/10 of 1% of Americans decide to be stupid, that's 300,000 people. And if even 10% of that 300,000 people, which is 30,000, or 1%, which is 3,000, have the virus and the capacity to spread it, that could be trouble. So that is the real worry here. My thought is that we're going to be all set by the end of this month. I've been saying for a very long time that this is going to be only about 6 weeks. As by the end of April, we're going to be able to get back to pretty much normal. And remember, we're still 2 weeks away from that date. That we're still the incubation period of the virus away from that date. And remember this from the last podcast we did. The people who are dying from the virus now caught it 2 and 3 weeks ago. So if the numbers of dead keep dropping, the number of infections are going to go up because there's more testing. So people who've already had the virus and not had symptoms are going to be are going to show that they're positive for the antibodies or whatever. But the number of deaths are going to keep dropping because the incubation period is gone. So the real question is going to be, how fast will people recognize it? And how fast will people be able to get back? And remember, these are things that they're all discussing. Each state is now going to be, it's going to be on them because of what the president did. Because now the president, by asserting his power and saying, I have the power, and now the states, no, we have the power. Good. Now use the power. Use it wisely. The president has just put everything on the states now. The states that do a poor job will be noticed. The states that do a good job will not be. It will be noticed too. And now maybe Democrat governors will do a good job. Maybe they won't. In Michigan, they probably won't. But it will be very, very interesting to see what's going on. Very, very, very interesting to see what's going on. And it's very, very funny to watch all this happen. And it's like, in a way, watching Trump deal with these guys is like watching a Three Stooges skit, in the sense that that Curly is going to grab the wrong pie. That they're going to put the sponge on instead of the pancake. That they're about to do something stupid. You see it coming. The audience sees it coming. But the stooge doesn't see it until the pie hits him in the face, or the plank hits him, or until he falls off the plate, the table, etc. And Trump does it to them over and over again. He's just done it to them again. They just haven't seen it yet. And it's hilarious that they haven't seen it yet. God knows what's wrong with these people. And he's not telling. It's really, really funny. I mean, he's got them defending China and the WHO, and that brings us to our next topic. Who are you, or we won't be fooled again? The president has suspended funding to the World Health Organization, or WHO, and pending an investigation of if they've been playing propaganda games for China. Now, China has been incredibly dishonest in all this, but they pay well. And it's really, really funny to watch over and over Chinese propaganda be asserted and reasserted and reasserted and reasserted by the networks as the real thing. What's really funny is, is CNN reporting? I'm looking around the net as this is going on, and I want to read you this little bit from Twitchy here. CNN has been doing a great job of parroting Chinese propaganda, as Twitchy reported. The network recently posted to a website a piece pretty much cut and pasted from the People's Liberation Army website, reporting that China's Navy has done a better job controlling the spread of the coronavirus than the U.S. Navy. CNN ended up totally overhauling the story the next day. But CNN surprised many Thursday by reporting some breaking news. China, it seems, hid critical information about the coronavirus from both its own citizens and the world. This is from the lead CNN. Chinese government officials hid critical information from its people in the world when the epidemic first began, David Culver reports. Of course they did! They're effing communists! I mean, granted, a lot of people did not, who are alive today, were not allowed for the Cold War. And some are not alive, who are alive today, never saw Baghdad Bob. The Soviet Union and the communist nations are Baghdad Bob. Basically, people who say falsehoods. This is what they do. This is what they've always been. It's the big lie. It's Hitler's big lie. The only difference between Nazis and communists are better PR for communists. That's it. There is no significant difference. Nazis and communists are the same. And they deserve the same respect, which is none. But the defense of the WHO is really something. When they were parroting the communist Chinese over and over and over again, and the fact that the president has gotten Democrats to defend these guys is hilarious. And in fact, what's really funny is the amount of funding that is being withheld from them by the president. Bill Gates went online saying how terrible that was. And then Ted Cruz went out there and noted that Mr. Gates' personal fortune was enough to fund the WHO based on the president's numbers for 400 something years. In other words, he could literally write a check to cover what the U.S. contribution to the WHO is. And if he wants to, that's great. That's his money. He is more than welcome to do this. But the fact that the WHO has decided, I like this line, Land O'Lakes Indian maiden bows to political correctness, which is really stupid on their part, but the butter's still the same butter. You don't never give the politically correct, by the way. Never bow to them, because all they want is more. Once you start feeding the Dane geld, you never get rid of the Dane, as the old saying goes. But, and here's, speaking of China lying, China increases Wuhan coronavirus death toll by 50%, but denies cover-up. Of course, in fairness, some American cities are increasing their coronavirus death toll, but that's because if someone dies of coronavirus, they get more federal funding, so they're actually reclassifying some people. But it's really, really funny to watch Democrats rush to defend the WHO and rush to defend a Chinese propaganda operation and an organization that's led by an old communist. It's just hilarious. And yet they don't understand that doing this will hurt them. Now, with some part of their voters, they won't hurt them. With the Never Trump component, it does not matter, because to them, the Wuhan virus is not what's important. Defeating Donald Trump is important. And anything that will defeat Donald Trump, in their opinion, is valid, and I have to apologize. I just saw Ace of Spades at Ace of Spades mu.nu had a picture up of Albert Dürer, and when I see that, all I can think of is the Monty Python German version, which it's available on Netflix. Monty Python's Feiginger Circus. You have to watch it. It's hilarious. Uh, the fact that Trump is getting these people to all defend China, when people understand that this came from China, and many people are now understanding that this is probably a weaponized virus that was accidentally released. And I say accidentally because they're not likely to have released it on their own people and risk themselves. Although you never know. China slaughtered 30 million of its own people. It could have been an experiment, but who knows? The point is that it's very, very, very funny to watch these Democrats that's do this stuff. And it's very funny again for them to fall into Trump's trap. And defunding the WHO is a no-brainer. And right now, all over the world, people are suspicious of China. In England, they're suspicious of China. In Africa, where China has spent millions and billions of dollars buying friends, countries are having second thoughts because of the virus. And there's this very nice piece from Lyman Stone that says, suspending WHO funding should just be the beginning. And we're going to quote a little bit from that. Dr. Tedros' leadership was cause for concern from the start. He continues to assert to this day that the 3 separate outbreaks of cholera in Ethiopia under his watch were not cholera at all, but simply acute watery diarrhea. His active complicity in covering up not 1, not 2, but 3 separate outbreaks of an extremely dangerous notifiable disease raises enormous questions about his fitness as leader for an organization whose primary job is disease surveillance. In service to an authoritarian government in Ethiopia, Dr. Tedros buried the truth about cholera in Ethiopia, and in the process probably buried many of his countrymen and their children. It gets worse. Cholera outbreaks in the region began in Sudan. Ethiopia asserted that it was no problem, so extra precautions were not taken. But after Dr. Tedros headed to the WHO, cholera appeared in Somalia, apparently having hopped over neighboring Ethiopia. It has since spread with incredibly lethal consequences to Yemen. Today, Ethiopia has finally acknowledged the presence of cholera, but it's too late. Thousands are dead in part of Dr. Tedros' cover-up. You might think that this terrible behavior would be strange in a WHO Director General, but far from it. The WHO continues to assert that fewer than 10,000 people died in the 2010 Haiti cholera outbreak, an outbreak caused by infected UN peacekeeping forces. Yet detailed research from Medicine Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders, has shown the true deaths may be anywhere from 3 to 15 times as high. The previous WHO Director General representing China called North Korea's healthcare system, quote, something other countries would envy, unquote. And in a country in the throes of salvation, lauded North Korea's lack of obesity. I want to read that again. And in a country in the throes of starvation, lauded North Korea's lack of obesity. Meanwhile, Chan has also widely promoted the idea that the 2009 flu season would be a massive global pandemic, a claim that failed to come through, with 2009 flu deaths in many countries coming in lower than either the year before or the year after. One wonders if this panicky reaction was motivated by the fact that early reports wrongly suggested that the swine flu began in the U.S. It actually began in Mexico. You can find that at the dispatch.com, by the way, if you want to read the whole thing. That's from Lyman Stone. And it's going to be, it's very, very funny. This is again, not only and again, I talk about the smart thing being the right thing. The right thing is to defund WHO, and that's also the smart thing. But it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does. People decide they have to do the opposite. Simply amazing. All right, we've already gone over an hour, so I want to go through a couple of quick takes on subjects. We're going to have to drop the baseball subject. I'm just going to allude to it briefly. Mike Trout, probably the best baseball player over the last 10 years, has had some bad things to say about the Major League Baseball plan of playing in Arizona and isolating everyone, saying, like my baby's going to be born and I'm quarantining my family or not going to miss that and so forth. And he has a perfect right to do that. He also has a perfect right not to be paid the millions of dollars he's paid to playing baseball. The problem with sports players is they forget that when it comes down to it, although for me baseball is a vital thing, it's not really vital. Sports is not vital. I mean, it's a great thing for us. It makes us feel better, but it's not vital. So, if you're making millions of dollars from a non-vital thing and you want to keep those millions of dollars, you play. My wife is going back to work tomorrow. My wife is a nurse. My wife has asthma. So she's at greater risk. She's going to be exposed. She's almost certainly going to be exposed to people who have the virus. And there's some risk there. Now, she makes a decent living, but she doesn't make Mike Trout money. Crap, she doesn't even make Oil Can Boyd money. For those of you who don't know, Oil Can Boyd pitched for the Red Sox in 1986. She doesn't make the money that the lowest paid Major League Baseball gets as the minimum. She makes more than minor leaguers, although not if you put it out annually. But the point is, she's going to go out and she's going to go there and make that living. Now, Mike Trout, he's wealthy enough that if he misses a year's pay, he can probably handle it. And there are a lot of baseball players who can. But if you want to make money, if you're going to have a career like that, you work for it. There are soldiers who don't see their families for months on end or years on end. You can handle it for 2 or 3 months. Now, if you decide you want to leave quarantine and not, if you decide you don't want to go because your first child is going to be born, I can understand that. And you want to forfeit for the year, that's fine. But for most players, I'd play and I'd not whine about it. Another quick takes. Man released from Florida jail to help prevent the spread of coronavirus murders someone the next day. That's from John Sexton at Hot Air. Inmates around the world have been released because of legitimate concern that prisons and jails would be an ideal place for coronavirus to spread. Now, I think that a place where everyone's isolated would be an easy place to keep a virus in play. In the U.S., the virus has spread to nearly 1,000 people at Rikers Island and Cook County Jail in Chicago has been hit worse, so the decision to release as many prisoners as possible to reduce density is something many state officials have been doing. Last month, Hillsborough State Sheriff Chad Consper announced the release of 164 prisoners in the county jail in response to a judicial order. Hillsborough County in Florida contains Tampa. Tampa Bay Times reported on the condition of the jails at the time. Unfortunately, in this case, one of the inmates released that day killed someone the very next day. Joseph Edward Williams, 26, was arrested Monday in connection with a March 20th murder in the 8,000 block avenue of Ash Ave, according to the sheriff's office. He's charged with second-degree murder, resisting arson, being a felon in possession of a firearm, and possession of heroin and drug paraphernalia. His bail was set as $280,500. I don't understand the 500 there. But I'm sorry, if you release criminals, you know what happens? Crime increases. This is a no-brainer. This is a very stupid thing to do. But, people are in jail for a reason. It's just silly. But again, Democrats are pushing for it. And even funnier, and that leads me to my last extra thing. It's very, very funny. And I tweeted this out before the podcast because I saw it and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. And part of it comes from Instapundit. And Instapundit had this tweet concerning the Small Business Administration funding. Now, the small business loan program has been very, very effective. So effective that it's out of money. And the Democrats are holding out, putting the money back in because they want other things. And this is a tweet from Jim Jordan, who's a representative from Ohio. Quote, amendment rights are non-essential to protect yourself. You can't make this out. And he has the quote from the Democrat piece. This is from the bill itself. C, use of grant funds. A guarantee shall use amounts provided as a grant under this protection for programs that provide for the following: adopting and operating a cite and release process for individuals who are suspected of committing misdemeanor and or felony offenses who do not pose a serious risk of imminent injury to a reasonably identifiable person. Now, I think that tweet is a really tough tweet. Or as Glenn Reynolds put it, harsh but fair. Now, one thing about politicians, when they put out tweets, usually you have the opposition rushing to be first to answer it. And this is no exception. The person running against her was the first to answer the tweet, replying to Jim Jordan. If you support a strong Democrat woman over a Republican, Jim Jordan, retweet this and join to the fight. Beat Jordan, Shannon, and 4. Now, my thought on that tweet from Shannon from Ohio was this. Do you really want your tweet about beating the guy to be the one in response to Democrats wanting to pay states to release prisoners? I mean, seriously. And I tweeted her back saying, well, perhaps you're hoping one of those criminals who you want to pay states to let out of prison will do that for you, a la Rand Paul's neighbor. Remember, I was hitting the left last week for someone at the Daily Calls for cheering on Rand Paul's neighbor, who did nothing wrong by beating Rand Paul to the point where he needed surgery. Pro tip, nothing wrong with an election 2020 counter ad on Twitter, but I would have used a different tweet to use it on. Maybe it's just me. But again, this is Democrats. Democrats, they're not thinking, does not enter into it. Thinking does not enter into it. And when thinking does not enter into it, hilarity generally follows. And I got to tell you, there's nothing more hilarious than that. I want to close with this thing. Pro-PAC Trump hints Beijing Biden cites China cheerleading. A pro-Trump super PAC is hitting the airways with 3 industrial battleground states with new ads that label Joe Biden as a China sympathizer at a time when America is concerned with the communist nations lying about the coronavirus and stealing U.S. jobs. America's first action set starting tomorrow will spend $10 million in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania on ads hitting the presumptive 2020 presidential nominee as Beijing Biden. In each will use different lines that Biden has said cheering China in the past. And I think that that's really going to beat up on them. I think the Democrats are making a huge mistake here, because this is something that the average American affects them. It's not like political campaigns which is an awful lot like. I'm sorry, someone just showed me. I just saw a picture of a chimp with a coronavirus mask. That's hilarious. It's not something that you're like cheerleading for your home team. These are things that are going to actually affect what people live or die. And I think that this is funny. I think it's really funny. Well, that's all the time we have. If you like this podcast, I would ask you to up arrow it or consider subscribing on YouTube. I'm still a couple hundred subscribers away from being able to monetize the channel. And a reminder that the reason why I do this side of these podcasts as a successor to my old syndicated radio show is I'm looking to raise about an extra $180 a month. And I want to thank the people who've hit the tip jar so far. We got 45 of the 180 for this month, so we're short about another 135. So if you think we're worthwhile, share this video, share the post that had it, and consider hitting the tip jar, because that's what pays the bills for my writers. That's what pays for the web hosting. That's what pays for everything. Everything is paid for by you. Now, I don't make a whole lot of money on this, but according to my taxes, only a couple of thousand over the course of a year. So it's a lot of time we write articles every single day. I write 360 or more a year, plus the reporting, although I'm not obviously out doing the reporting now, and the podcast and so forth. It's a lot of work for very little return. And hopefully you find that return worthwhile. And unlike the mainstream media, you know where I stand. I am a conservative Catholic. I don't pretend that I'm not. You want to disagree with me? That's fine. You want to point out the things that are wrong with my arguments? That's fine too. I'm not afraid of people criticizing what I have to say. But if you like what I do, please consider hitting the tip jar at DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuyblog.com. blog.com, or buy my book, Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant and Catholic Prayer, and that'll help pay for things along. Well, we will see you Sunday morning at 12:35 a.m. Until then, this is Pete the Tech Guy saying thank you for your time. And the Tech Guy's Friday morning court is now officially adjourned. Take care, all. Stay safe.